They hired a stranger to dissect your soul and still walked away more scared of you than of the truth about themselves. My dear chosen one, let that sink in for a second. They didn't just gossip about you. They didn't just roll their eyes and call you too much. They went so far that they pulled in an outsider like, "Please explain this person to us because our small minds can't make sense of them." That's not hate. That's intimidation dressed up as concern. That's fear with makeup on. This is that they tried to read you like a book and choked on the first page moment. They thought this would be simple. Bring in a psychic, lay your name on the table, shuffle a few cards, and get a neat little explanation that makes them feel superior again. Oh, they're just sensitive. They're just dramatic. They're just overthinking. That's what they were hoping to hear. Something that shrinks you back into a box they can manage. But my dear chosen one, boxes are for things that don't grow. You've been outgrowing every version of yourself they ever thought they knew. Picture the scene. Your name hits the air and the room shifts. They don't admit it, but you know what I'm talking about. That sudden pause, that glance, that little crack in the voice when your story comes up. They pretend you're irrelevant, but their body language keeps snitching. You're the problem they can't stop circling back to. You're the issue that mysteriously lives rent-free in all their conversations. So they do what cowards do when they can't break you directly. They outsource the job. They bring in her, the expert, the reader, the one who's seen it all. And in their heads, this is perfect. Finally, someone will tell them what they want to hear, that you're unstable, that you're secretly the villain, that everything they did to you was justified. They didn't come looking for truth. They came looking for a stamp of approval on their disrespect. But here's where the plot twists and hits them right in the ego. The moment she reaches for your energy, something in her changes. The confidence drains, the rhythm breaks. The hands that have stayed steady through liars, cheaters, and manipulators suddenly hesitate. She doesn't see what they expected. She doesn't see a mess. She doesn't see chaos. She doesn't see an unhinged soul begging to be decoded. She sees structure. She sees survival. She sees a level of depth that doesn't add up with what they've been saying about you. And that's when the fear flips, not yours, theirs. Because here's the part your enemies will never admit out loud. Deep down, they already knew you weren't the fragile one. They already knew you weren't the unstable one. They already knew you weren't the weak link. That's the real reason they've always felt the need to team up, to whisper, to twist stories. They sensed your power before you did. They just hoped if they broke you fast enough, you'd never figure it out. You might be asking yourself right now, if I'm so powerful, why do I feel so tired? Why did all of this hurt me so much? Why does being chosen feel like I've been put through a grinder instead of placed on a throne? Because, my dear chosen one, being chosen is not about being treated gently. It's about being forged. Before we move any further, my dear chosen ones, pause with me for a moment. If this message is hitting you in the chest, if you feel that spark waking up inside you, then support this journey we're building together. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and let us know you're here. Every click, every subscription, every bit of engagement helps us keep creating the powerful, inspiring, and life-shifting content you deserve. Your support fuels the energy behind these messages, and together we rise louder, stronger, and unstoppable. You weren't built in comfort, you were built under pressure. You were built in rooms where nobody defended you. You were built in moments where you cried yourself to sleep and still woke up and handled life anyway. You were built every time someone tried to break you and accidentally made you more self-aware instead. That's what she felt. Not some spooky curse, not some villain energy. She felt the weight of everything you've survived and stayed sane through. She realized she wasn't reading someone on the edge. She was reading someone who'd already been pushed off the edge, hit the ground, and learned how to walk away from it like it was just another Tuesday. So when she backed up, when she refused to finish, when she said not today and left that room thick with silence, she wasn't protecting herself from you. She was protecting them from the truth about you. The truth that you don't stay broken. The truth that you don't stay small. The truth that everything they did to control you only proved how little control they ever had. You want to know why they're obsessed, why they keep bringing your name up, why they keep needing outside opinions, readings, advice about you. Because you are the walking proof that their version of you was a lie. That's what stings. You were supposed to collapse. You were supposed to beg, to chase, to fall apart. Instead, you turned silent. You turned focused. You turned inward. And that terrified them more than any argument ever could. My dear chosen ones watching this is your wake-up call. You are not the weirdo they couldn't understand. You are the upgrade they couldn't handle. You are not the storm they predicted. You are the weather pattern they could never read. They thought hiring someone to expose you would give them power. Instead, it exposed how out of their depth they are when it comes to you. If you're still here, it's not by accident. You already know this message is brushing against something in you that refuses to die. So take a breath, lock in, and stay with me. Because we're not just telling a story about a psychic who walked away. We're unpacking the moment your enemies finally realized the truth. You were never the one on trial. You were the one they weren't equipped to stand next to. Chosen one, before we step deeper into this unraveling story they never wanted you to hear, take a moment to anchor yourself right here with us. If this message is already stirring something familiar in your chest, something you felt long before they hired that psychic to decode you, then show your strength in the simplest way possible. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a 77 in the comments so we know you're locked in with the ones who can't be read, can't be broken, and can't be explained. Your support keeps this energy alive and helps us bring you more content that speaks directly to your evolution. And now, let's step into the truth, layer by layer. If you really are the chosen one they failed to expose, trust me, what comes next will feel like someone finally put words to everything you've always known. Let's begin. Number 1. The moment the truth reader realized your depth could break her. When the watcher looked into you and saw her own limits break. They wanted someone to expose you, but the only thing that got exposed was how small they look, standing next to the person they tried to study. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about this moment. The moment they thought they were clever, strategic, calculating. The moment they believed hiring a psychic would finally give them the upper hand. In their minds, this was their grand move, their victory lap, their last-ditch attempt to shrink you into something they could label or manage. But all they really did was hand your energy to someone who wasn't ready for what she was about to face. Someone who walked in confident and walked out rattled, shaken, and questioning everything she thought she knew. Let's break this open, because what happened wasn't random, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't exaggerated. It was the predictable outcome of someone encountering a chosen one whose story breaks every formula they use to understand people. And trust me, chosen one, this isn't about ego. This is about truth. You have lived through things that would have folded the average person like paper. You have survived storms that weren't meant to be survivable. You rebuilt yourself in silence, in isolation, in the corners of your life where nobody clapped for you. And that kind of strength doesn't come out clean or easy. It comes out heavy, layered, undeniable. That's what she felt. That's why she froze. She didn't sit there trembling because she saw something dark. She wasn't scared of some mythical danger they love pretending you carry. No, what scared her was the realization that you'd been walking around holding pressure she couldn't even withstand for a minute. Imagine someone trying to read your energy and realizing they aren't built to lift the weight you carry daily. That's what collapsed her confidence. That's what made her hands shake. She connected to you for a few seconds and felt endurance that embarrassed every lie your enemies have told about you. My dear chosen ones, you might be wondering, why do people react like this around me? Why do strangers sense things my own friends ignore? Why do some people look at me and suddenly get uncomfortable? Here's your answer: straight, simple, and neutral. Strength exposes weakness. Depth exposes shallowness. Clarity exposes confusion. And your existence exposes the truth in people who spend their whole lives hiding from themselves. This psychic, this so-called expert, came in expecting to dissect you like you were some kind of predictable case study. She thought she'd seen every type of soul, every type of trauma, every type of pattern, until she met you. She didn't meet a pattern. She met a paradox. She didn't meet a victim. She met someone who turned their own ruins into architecture. You stood there like a structure built over everything that should have destroyed you. Each floor a hardship, each beam a scar converted into steel. That's why her eyes flickered. That's why her breath stalled. That's why she quietly realized she was dealing with something that doesn't fit inside the usual human timeline. Because what do you do with a person who should have fallen apart years ago but didn't? What do you do with someone whose heartbreaks rewired them instead of breaking them? What do you do when you try to expose a person and end up exposing your own limitations? She saw your past, not as tragedy, but as proof. Proof that you adapt, proof that you evolve, proof that every attempt to break you simply sharpened the point of your existence. And your enemies? Oh, they panicked. They expected her to confirm their narrative, that you were the unstable one, the emotional one, the overreactor. Instead, she saw the opposite. She saw someone who doesn't break the way normal people break. She saw someone who carries pain like it's information, someone whose silence isn't emptiness, it's strategy, someone whose calm isn't weakness, it's control. What they didn't realize is that your energy demands integrity. People who can't meet that standard crumble on their own. They mistake their own collapse for your impact. They mistake their own guilt for your presence. They mistake their own insecurities for your intentions. That's why the psychic wasn't terrified of you. She was terrified for them. She saw the mismatch. She saw the arrogance. She saw how unprepared they truly were. She saw that they weren't dealing with someone fragile. They were dealing with someone forged, someone who had lived through things they will never comprehend. My dear chosen ones, listen closely now. She wasn't reading you. She was being confronted by you. She wasn't revealing your flaws. She was witnessing their lies crumble. She wasn't stopping the reading because she was weak. She stopped because finishing it would have exposed every projection they ever placed on your name. She backed away because she realized the truth your enemies cannot hold without breaking. You are not the threat they fear. You are the reality they can't handle. You are not the villain they whisper about. You are the aftermath of everything that tried to destroy you. And that's why, when they tried to expose you, all she found was them. Number 2, the unshatterable core. They tried and failed to fracture the soul. They tried to shatter, but couldn't even scratch. They came looking for your weakness, and all they found was proof that you've already survived everything they could ever weaponize. My dear chosen ones, let's walk into this chapter with our heads high, because this is the part that makes your enemies grind their teeth in private. They wanted proof that you were fragile. They wanted validation that their cruelty had worked. They wanted to hear that you were falling apart, spiraling, breaking down somewhere behind closed doors. But instead of finding a wounded soul, they ran straight into something that defied every expectation they had. A soul that refused to shatter, even under the kind of pressure that would have erased most people from the inside out. When that psychic looked at you, she didn't freeze because she saw pain. Pain is easy to read. Pain is predictable. Pain follows patterns. No, she froze because she saw what the pain became. She expected to find emotional debris. She expected to see the usual signs of someone who had been beaten down: limp energy, cracked timelines, a spirit dragging itself through the remnants of old wounds. Instead, what she saw made her question her own expertise. Right there in front of her was someone whose scars didn't sag, they glowed. Someone whose memories didn't haunt, they sharpened. Someone whose past didn't break them, it carved them into something stronger than anyone in that room could comprehend. You know what that looks like, Chosen One? It's like holding a glass in your hand, dropping it, and expecting it to shatter. But instead, it fuses mid-air, reforging itself into something more beautiful, more structured, and more unbreakable than before. That's what she saw. A survival story that made no logical sense. A person who didn't just survive impact. You absorbed it, repurposed it, evolved because of it. And there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that terrifies small-minded people more than a human being who was supposed to be a victim and chose not to stay one. And here's the part that shook her even more. You weren't surprised. You weren't confused. You weren't scrambling to understand what was happening. You carried yourself like someone who had already predicted the entire setup long before they even dialed her number. The quiet confidence, the stillness, the way your energy didn't twitch or tremble. She noticed all of that. She felt that you knew they sent her. You knew what they hoped she'd uncover. And yet you let it unfold, not because you were clueless, but because you wanted to see the depth of their desperation. You wanted to observe the final lengths they'd crawl to in an attempt to break someone who'd already rebuilt themselves far beyond their reach. Imagine sitting across from people who think they're playing chess with you, moving their pieces with smug satisfaction, not realizing you're the one who already positioned the checkmate long before their first move. That's how your energy felt to her. Steady, aware, unbothered, and in control in a way that made her question how much you already knew. And for the chosen ones asking quietly, why didn't I expose them sooner? Why didn't I defend myself? Why did I stay silent? Here's your answer: because you didn't need to. Because silence wasn't weakness, it was observation. Because while they were busy plotting, you were busy evolving. Because you were never avoiding confrontation. You were letting them reveal their true nature, letting them prove exactly who they were without you lifting a single finger. She saw that. She saw someone who had been battered by life, but didn't twist, didn't rot, didn't collapse inward. She saw a soul that grew sharper, clearer, almost luminous. That kind of evolution is rare. Most people let pain deform them. But you, pain refined you. Pain distilled you into someone with deeper perception, stronger boundaries, and a level of resilience that terrified her because she had no frame of reference for a transformation like yours. Your enemies, predictable as ever, followed patterns. You broke every single one. They played dirty. You stayed clean. They plotted in the dark. You rose in the light. Every lie they told tightened your clarity. Every betrayal they attempted sharpened your discernment. Every jab they threw made your foundation stronger. She realized the one truth they never wanted to face. You are not controlled by their actions. You are fueled by them. And let's talk about that energy she read. That energy that refused to break. It looked like a blade they kept trying to dull. And every strike, instead of weakening you, only sharpened your edge. Because people like you don't break, you reboot, you rebuild, you reinvent. And every version becomes harder to misread, harder to manipulate, harder to destroy. You're unforgettable, chosen one. And unforgettable people get tested, not because they're weak, but because their strength disrupts fragile systems. Your presence exposes people. Your silence reveals the truth they tried to bury. Your existence alone becomes a mirror they cannot look into without flinching. And when she saw all of this, the lived experience, the inner rebirth, the rising from ashes without theatrics, she understood why you couldn't be broken, because you already had been. And instead of staying shattered, you rebuilt yourself into something they were never prepared to confront. That's why she couldn't finish the reading. She wasn't looking at a timeline anymore. She was looking at aftermath. The aftermath of everything you survived, everything you overcame, everything you transcended. And that, chosen one, is something no one can expose. They can't expose what outgrew their reach. They can't break what rebuilt itself. And they can't understand what was never meant for their understanding in the first place. Number 3. The tools that glitched the second they touched your energy, when the cards turned against their own reader. They tried to read your story, chosen one, but the tools they trusted ended up refusing to touch your truth. My dear chosen ones, this part of the story hits differently because it exposes something your enemies never planned for. The moment the very tools meant to dissect you turned their backs on the hands that held them. The moment the deck, her trusted, obedient companion for years, stopped behaving, not because something was wrong with the cards, but because something was too right about you. And yes, chosen one, this is where their plan fell apart faster than their courage. She walked into that room with her chin high, with her years of experience like armor, thinking you'd be another simple case study. Another predictable soul with predictable wounds and predictable reactions. She thought your life would unfold under her fingertips the way it had done for dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of others. She thought she would shuffle, pull, read, explain, while your enemies waited for confirmation that their story about you was true. But here's the thing your enemies didn't know. You are not a story. You are a shockwave. A disruption, a shift, and the deeper she reached into your energy, the more the deck started glitching. Cards flipped sideways like they were warning her. Cards slid out of her grip like they were rejecting her intentions. Cards reversed themselves as if correcting her before she even spoke. She wasn't losing control, no. She was losing her ability to pretend she understood what she was facing. Imagine a storm refusing to be measured. Imagine a flame refusing to be contained. Imagine every card she pulled feeling less like a reading and more like a mirror reflecting back the limitations of the person holding them. That's what she stepped into, chosen one. She thought she was reading you, but the deck was reading her. And you might be wondering, why do people always say I don't make sense? Why do systems, labels, categories never fit me? Why do others try to explain me but end up exposing themselves instead? Because you weren't made for their systems. You weren't shaped by their timelines. You didn't grow inside the neat lines they use to define others. You're not confusion, you're complexity. You're not chaos, you're evolution in motion. You don't follow patterns, you break them and build new ones without even trying. You are too many lessons, too many rebirths, too many reinventions stacked into one life for anyone to map you using tools created for ordinary souls. And that's exactly what rattled her. She wasn't looking at a timeline, she was looking at a force. She wasn't seeing simple beginnings and endings. She was seeing layers, cycles, transformations that didn't align with any structure she'd ever studied. She saw birth, death, rebirth, all happening in the same person. She saw endings that led to beginnings without closure. She saw wounds that turned into wisdom before they could scar. She saw a life that didn't move in straight lines. It moved like a spiral, like a storm, like a pattern only you could understand from the inside. That's why her body stiffened. That's why her breath shortened. That's why her eyes kept flicking toward the door, like she expected something to walk in behind her, because she realized she was outmatched. Not by you, Chosen One, not by your presence, but by your depth. She wasn't scared of the cards. She was scared of what the cards refused to show her. Because here's the truth she didn't dare say out loud. Your cards weren't malfunctioning. They were protecting you. They were creating a barrier she wasn't meant to cross. Every card that resisted her touch was a warning. Every symbol that twisted itself was a boundary. Every strange flip or reversal was the deck saying, "This one is off limits." And the deeper she tried to dig, the harder the deck pushed back. Those cards weren't revealing your story. They were revealing hers, her intentions, her limitations, her inability to decode someone who doesn't run on ordinary rules. She didn't walk away because she was scared of you. She walked away because she realized the reading wasn't hers to give. She realized she wasn't allowed to open certain doors. She realized she wasn't authorized to access someone whose evolution rewrote every rule she's ever learned. The deck didn't betray her. The deck protected you, and it whispered the message she didn't have the courage to translate. Stop. This one cannot be read. This one cannot be exposed. This one is beyond your reach. That was the moment they realized the truth. Not that you were unreadable, but that they were unqualified to read you. And, Chosen One, that realization was the first crack in their entire plan. Number 4. The instant the investigator became the investigated. When the hunter looked into your story and discovered she was the one being tracked. They sent her to study you, Chosen One. But the moment she touched your energy, the only thing revealed was how unprepared she was to be in the same room as you. My dear Chosen Ones, this is the chapter where everything turned upside down, not because you said anything, not because you revealed anything, but because the person sent to dissect you realized halfway through that she wasn't the hunter. She was the one being examined. They hired her expecting clarity, expecting ammunition, expecting answers that would make them feel superior again. But what they didn't plan for, what they never plan for, is that your energy doesn't sit still and wait to be labeled. Your energy reflects, it exposes, it evaluates. And the moment she tried to read you, the script flipped so violently she could barely keep her composure. She pushed through the reading not with confidence, but with pride, a fragile kind of pride that cracks the second it hits something deeper than it can handle. She knew, even before the first card hit the table, that something about you was rewriting the atmosphere. The air didn't behave the way it normally does for her sessions. The silence wasn't soft. It was focused. It was aware. It was watching her. She tried to hide the shift, but Chosen Ones notice everything, even the things people don't say out loud. You could feel her slipping. You could feel her misreading her own instincts, and still she kept pulling cards because she couldn't face the humiliation of going back to your enemies empty-handed. They were counting on her. They wanted proof you were the unstable one, the dramatic one, the deeply flawed one. They wanted someone else, anyone else, to confirm the twisted narrative they built out of jealousy and insecurity. They weren't looking for truth. They were looking for validation, and she knew that. That pressure sat on her shoulders like a weight. But when she pulled those cards, something unexpected happened. They didn't align with her intentions. They didn't bend to her interpretations. They didn't reveal what she wanted. Instead, every card acted like a siren blaring the same message. Boundary, solitude. Pain turned into power, strength earned in silence, wisdom carved out through adversity. The cards weren't describing a victim. They weren't describing chaos. They were describing someone built differently, someone who didn't rise by accident, Someone who didn't survive because of luck. Someone who transformed through choice, conscious, deliberate, unshakable choice. And that's when it clicked for her. She wasn't reading you. She was being confronted by everything she pretended to understand about people. Imagine a detective searching for fingerprints, only to realize every mark she sees is her own. That's what was happening to her. She wasn't uncovering your flaws. She was staring at the limits of her own perception, her own fears, her own biases. She came to expose you, and instead, she got exposed. Your energy didn't attack her. It mirrored her. It made her see what she lacked: the resilience, the depth, the clarity, the internal strength you've been carrying like it's nothing more than air. You weren't revealing yourself, you were revealing her. You weren't opening doors, you were standing still while she realized none of the doors were meant for her to walk through. You gave her crumbs, chosen one, bare minimum glimpses, the faintest shadows of your battles, echoes of what you've survived. And she could barely handle that. She could feel that behind every tiny glimpse you allowed was a vault of experience, growth, transformation, and grit that she wasn't authorized to access. Imagine trying to crack a vault, only to discover the vault itself is alive, aware, alert, assessing you while you're trying to assess it. That's what being in your presence does. Your energy doesn't fold, it filters. It decides what is visible and what is not. And she suddenly realized that everything she'd seen up until that moment was permission, not revelation. She wasn't uncovering a hidden truth. She was bumping into the boundaries of someone who has survived too much to let strangers wander freely inside their mind. That's what cracked her confidence. Not darkness, not danger, not fear, but the realization that she was outmatched, outleveled, outgrown. The reading wasn't responding to her anymore because the cards weren't following her authority. They were following yours. They were answering you. And she felt it. The shift in control, the shift in momentum, the shift in power. She came in thinking she was the one holding the magnifying glass. But the longer she sat with you, the more she realized she was the one being observed. That's the moment the hunter realized she wasn't hunting, she was trespassing, and the deeper she looked into you, chosen one, the more she understood she was never meant to see the whole picture. Number 5. The silence that forced their fear to finally tell the truth, when their fear finally turned on them. They wanted evidence that you were unhinged, but the only cracks in the room were in their own stories. My dear chosen ones, this is where the mask fell off, not yours, but theirs. This is the moment the air turned thick enough to choke on, the moment their own fear circled back and sank its teeth into them. They came into that room ready to pounce, ready to devour whatever narrative the psychic placed in front of them. They were leaning in like scavengers, eager to hear something that would validate the story they've rehearsed for months, that you were the unstable one, that you were the dramatic one, that you were the storm. But what they didn't realize is that storms don't chase people. People walk into them. Before anyone spoke, something shifted. You know that feeling, chosen one, when tension moves like a shadow, when the atmosphere adjusts itself before the truth hits the room. They all felt it, but pretended they didn't. The psychic felt it and couldn't pretend at all. She wasn't looking at you for answers. She was looking at them. Because even without touching her deck, even without asking a single question, your energy did what it always does. It spoke. And it didn't just speak about you. It exposed them. They wanted thunder, but the storm wasn't outside. The storm was seated right in front of them, wrapped in composure, wrapped in survival, wrapped in a story that refused to break under their pressure. And when the psychic finally opened her mouth, she didn't give them the dagger they were drooling for. She delivered silence, that heavy, suffocating silence that always arrives when truth walks in uninvited. Then she asked the question that split their confidence clean down the spine. What did you do to this person? Not what's wrong with them. Not what darkness do they carry. Not what's the issue here. No, she turned the entire interrogation around because your energy told the truth before she could. Energy doesn't lie, chosen one, but guilty people do. And their guilt started leaking instantly. The shaky denial, the forced laughter, the rapid excuses, the desperate attempts to act confused, all of it was the language of people exposed by their own actions. She saw it. She saw everything. She saw betrayal written on your timeline like a bruise that healed into armor. She saw isolation deep enough to crush someone unprepared. She saw attempts to break you that should have worked, but didn't. And that's what rattled her. Not your strength, but their intention. You see, chosen one, some people don't just test you. They want to see you fall. They want to confirm that their cruelty had an impact. They want validation for the harm they caused. But what this psychic saw was something they never expected. Someone who took the very pain meant to destroy them and turned it into structure. Someone who transformed every cut into clarity. Someone who metabolized betrayal into boundaries. Someone who didn't just survive. They upgraded. She saw that you became something unshakable. Not because life was easy, but because life tried you repeatedly and lost. She saw that your resilience wasn't accidental. It was engineered by every moment you had to rebuild yourself from fractures they never even bothered to understand. And in that room, she could feel the gravity of your experience pulling the truth out of their mouths, whether they wanted it or not. Your enemies knew what she saw. They felt it in the tightening of their throats, in the unease crawling across their faces. They didn't fear your power. They feared what your power confirmed, that you survived them, that you climbed out of situations they expected to bury you, that you walked away from wars they created without carrying their shame. And the cruelest truth for them is this: you never fought them. You never chased them. You never harmed them. You simply survived them. And surviving someone who intended to break you, that is the one thing fragile people cannot forgive. That's why fear spread in that room. Not because you were dangerous, but because you were still standing. Not because your energy was chaotic, but because it was undeniable. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your existence alone invalidated every story they tried to build about you. My dear chosen ones, let this settle in your bones. Their fear didn't turn on them because of who you are. It turned on them because of who they tried to be in your story. And nothing hits a guilty conscience harder than being seen by someone who was never supposed to survive long enough to see the truth. Number 6. The final card that exposed a future they weren't built to face. The card that turned her courage into footsteps, running the other way. They wanted the truth to hurt you, but the only thing that hurt was their illusion of control the moment your future stared back at them. My dear chosen ones, this is the part of the story where everything they thought they understood about you snapped like a cheap thread under real pressure. This is where their arrogance finally met the reality of who you are becoming. They wanted a simple answer, a simple reading, a simple confirmation that the version of you in their heads was still the real you. But chosen ones don't stay who they were yesterday, and that was their first mistake, assuming your evolution moved at the same speed as their imagination. The psychic they hired walked into that room thinking she was there to reveal something about you. She left realizing she'd accidentally revealed everything about herself, and everything they were too afraid to face. She pulled that last card with the confidence of someone who believed she still held the reins, the way a soldier might pull a trigger, steady, controlled, expecting the world to obey. They leaned forward, hungry for closure, thinking this would be the moment she finally pinned you down with a label they could weaponize. But chosen one, the universe doesn't let small minds define people built from storms. The moment she flipped that card, her whole body betrayed her. Her breath cut short. Her pupils shrank. Her shoulders locked up like something unseen pressed its weight into her spine. It wasn't fear of you. It was the dawning comprehension that you are not someone who can be summarized, reduced, or captured in a single card. Imagine a professional who's handled thousands of readings suddenly staring at a card like it grew teeth. Someone who's trained to interpret anything suddenly unable to interpret you. That's what happened. She didn't attempt to explain. She didn't stall for time. She didn't soften the blow. She ran. Actual panic in her movements, actual urgency in her hands as she packed her tools like she was trying to outrun the future she just glimpsed. Candles snuffed out with a single exhale, smoke spinning in nervous spirals, cards snapped shut with the speed of a reflex she didn't even know she had. And when they tried to give her money, payment she would normally accept without blinking, she recoiled like they were offering her a live wire. The room froze as she whispered, "I can't." And suddenly their bravado evaporated. "Can't what?" they managed to ask, though their voices were cracking. "Can't finish, can't explain, can't help you." That's when the silence grew thick enough to choke on, because everyone in that room felt something shift. The truth didn't arrive politely. It dragged itself in like a presence they weren't prepared for. She hadn't seen danger coming for you. She saw danger radiating from you. Not because you're harmful, chosen one, but because you're evolving into someone whose path punishes interference. They expected a warning about your future. Instead, she saw your future as the warning. And here's what hit her hardest. You weren't being followed by chaos. You were becoming a force, a momentum, a rising trajectory that no one can intercept without getting burned. Some people walk into their future like they're stepping onto a bus. You, chosen one, you surge into yours like a tidal wave. What she saw wasn't destruction. It was transformation so intense it frightened her because it had no off switch, no pause button, no place for outsiders to meddle. Imagine watching a seed split open and realizing it wasn't a plant. It was something engineered for impact, something destined to reshape the environment around it. That's what she saw in you. She wasn't running from your shadow. She was running from your potential, from what you're becoming, from the version of you that has already outgrown the limits they placed on your name. She saw a chosen one sharpening with every betrayal, rising with every setback, aligning with a path no one else could step onto without collapsing. She saw a trajectory so precise and powerful that trying to interfere with it would be the equivalent of stepping in front of a fast-moving train and expecting kindness. And that's when she understood the truth your enemies still haven't processed. Trying to expose someone like you isn't brave, it's suicidal. Trying to define you isn't logic, it's delusion. Trying to control you isn't strategy, it's self-destruction. So she left. Not because she feared who you are, but because she respected who you're becoming. And the ones who hired her? They felt it too. The silent realization that they hadn't just poked a sleeping bear, they had provoked the future version of someone who doesn't break when pressured, someone who evolves, and chosen one. That is the moment your enemies finally understood. You are not the problem. You are the force they were never built to handle. Number 7. The realization that you operate beyond their understanding. The truth that made the psychic step back before her nerves snapped. They wanted someone to confirm their fantasies about you. Instead, she confirmed their fear. You've grown into someone they'll never be ready to face. My dear chosen ones, this is where everything shifts, where the mask slips, where the truth stops hiding behind polite silence, and where the people who tried to expose you realize they underestimated the wrong person. They thought they were about to witness your downfall, the grand unveiling of your supposed flaws, the moment someone with authority would finally validate their insecurities. But instead, They watched the one person who was supposed to reveal your weakness take one look at you and step back like she'd touched a live wire. Because real psychics, real readers, real observers of energy don't scare easily. They've sat across from people drowning in guilt, people carrying shame so heavy it drags the air down, people whose choices left deep cracks in their own timeline. They've handled messy histories, twisted motives, broken minds, and unhealed wounds. They don't flinch at emotional chaos. They don't tremble around heartbreak stories. They do not step away just because someone has lived through pain. Pain is familiar to them. Shadows are familiar. Confusion is familiar. But there is one thing even the strongest readers refuse to touch: a soul too evolved to be redirected, too awakened to be manipulated, too aligned with its own path to be interpreted by someone who wasn't part of its journey. That's what she sensed in you. She didn't see danger. She saw evolution. She saw a being who had been broken open by life and rebuilt themselves piece by piece until the blueprint no longer matched anything she had ever studied. She saw fire, not the destructive kind, but the kind that tempers steel. She saw someone who didn't just survive trauma. They integrated it, metabolized it, turned it into a form of understanding no textbook or deck of cards could ever decode. My dear chosen ones, she saw the versions of you that died along the way, the you who endured betrayal and kept walking, the you who survived nights you never spoke about, the you who rose from heartbreaks that should have rewritten you into someone bitter. She saw all those versions aligned behind you like silent guardians, not ghosts of tragedy, but ghosts of transformation. Proof of every rebirth you never bragged about. And that right there was the moment she stepped back. Because she realized she wasn't reading a story, she was standing in front of a force built from resilience, a force reinvented through suffering, a force that didn't collapse when life cracked it open, it crystallized. Your enemies didn't expect that. They expected theatrics, dramatic warnings, some exaggerated reading that justified their behavior. They expected her to point at you and confirm every rumor they've whispered behind your back. They wanted validation, not truth. They wanted to be told they weren't the problem. They wanted reassurance that their discomfort with your strength was justified. Instead, they watched her recoil, stunned, rattled, shaken by the magnitude of someone they underestimated for far too long. She saw that your energy wasn't seeking approval, validation, or understanding. Your energy was demanding respect. And people who lack respect for themselves panic when they encounter someone who embodies it effortlessly. She saw intuition woven into your instincts, resilience threaded into your thoughts, boundaries forged from every betrayal you outgrew. She saw someone who doesn't break when pushed, someone who sharpens, someone who doesn't lose themselves in chaos, someone who sees clearly through it, someone who doesn't crumble under pressure, someone who becomes more precise. And that terrified her, not because you were dangerous, but because she knew the people who hired her weren't prepared for the truth she was seeing. Your enemies wanted confirmation that you were unstable. She saw clarity. They wanted proof you were fragile. She saw strength that doesn't bend for anyone. They wanted justification for their behavior. She saw the reflection of their cowardice. They wanted to expose your flaws. She saw they were the ones with everything to hide. She didn't retreat because you were a threat. She retreated because she recognized the magnitude of someone who has transcended every trap, every expectation, every limitation others tried to place on them. She wasn't willing to challenge the trajectory you're on, a trajectory shaped by every storm that failed to take you down, and the people who hired her. The revelation hit them harder than any reading ever could, because for the first time they saw someone refuse to examine you not because you were dangerous, but because you were too evolved for her to interpret. They saw the one thing they never wanted to face. You've outgrown every trap they set, every lie they crafted, every assumption they clung to. And now they know. You weren't the problem. You were the evolution they could never keep up with. Number 8, the collapse of every excuse they hid behind. When their excuses buckled beneath the weight of your evolution. The moment the psychic stepped out of that room, my dear chosen ones, something inside them collapsed. Not the walls, not the floor. Them, the people who tried so hard to expose you, suddenly found themselves choking on the truth they spent months running from. And before they even whispered a single excuse, their bodies already told the story. The stiff posture, the dry swallow, the laughter that cracked halfway through. You know the type. The laughter people use when reality slaps them so hard they try to pretend it was a breeze, because deep down they already knew. She didn't walk out because she was dramatic. She didn't shake because she was startled. She walked out because she touched your energy and realized she had stepped into territory she wasn't trained for. And that, chosen one, is where the panic began. You see, fragile minds never confront truth head-on. They wrap it in excuses like cheap gift paper, hoping the cover-up is enough to protect their ego. She's emotional. She overreacted. She must have been tired. Those weren't explanations. They were life rafts, little plastic floaties for people drowning in the truth they never expected to face. And yet even while they spoke, their eyes betrayed them, darting, unsure, avoiding each other because the truth was too loud to ignore. A professional who has handled every kind of human emotion under the sun refused to finish the reading because of you. Not because you were dangerous, but because you were beyond her understanding, beyond their access, beyond their reach. Chosen one, imagine being so evolved that someone hired specifically to expose you ends up exposing them instead. Her trembling hands packing her tools in silence weren't signs of fear. They were acknowledgements. She had seen something that didn't fit the stories they fed her. Something that contradicted every narrative they tried to paint. Something that made her think twice, not about your character, but about theirs. And when she refused to take their money, oh, that was the moment the ground beneath them truly cracked. Because refusing payment wasn't just a gesture, it was a statement. It meant, I'm not taking currency for stepping into a place I shouldn't have entered. It meant, I've seen enough. It meant, this one is out of your league. And that, more than anything, is the truth they couldn't swallow. Chosen one, you have to understand something. These people weren't afraid of you being dark or mysterious. They were afraid of something far simpler and far more humiliating, that you outgrew them so completely they no longer matter in your orbit. You outpaced them. You outlearned them. You out-evolved every lazy assumption they ever made about you. They're still plotting chess moves against someone who packed up the entire board and walked away without announcing a single checkmate. You stopped playing the game. That's why they couldn't handle it. Their manipulation didn't land. Their gossip didn't spread the way they hoped. Their silent treatment didn't break you. It only highlighted how peaceful your world becomes without them. They threw everything they had, and you, without trying, stepped sideways and let it all miss. That's the part that eats them alive. They don't understand how someone can stop reacting, stop explaining, stop engaging, and somehow rise even higher. They don't understand that control only works on people who need something. You needed nothing from them, and nothing terrifies controlling people more than losing their leverage. That's why they scrambled for excuses. That's why they called her unstable. That's why they tried to rewrite the moment she left. Not because she was wrong, but because she was right. Her reaction confirmed what they feared most. You're not theirs to reach, to read, to influence, or to frame. You've grown too far beyond the version of you they thought they could dominate. My dear chosen ones, listen closely now. What truly petrified them wasn't the psychic's exit. It was the meaning behind it. Her refusal to continue wasn't a collapse. It was a verdict. a silent judgment they weren't prepared to receive. You are not on their level anymore, and you never will be again. That is what broke their excuses. That is what turned their voices shaky. That is what made their denial crumble under its own weight. Because you didn't just evolve. You disappeared from the ecosystem they depended on, and once you left their world, that world lost its ability to touch you. And that, chosen one, is the truth they can't unhear, no matter how many excuses they stack on top of it. Number 9. The evolution that made every old version of you obsolete. The one who turned every ending into an evolutionary flex. They feared the ending, chosen one, but the only thing ending was their illusion that they ever knew who you were becoming. My dear chosen ones, let's step into this part of the story with the intensity it deserves, because what happened here wasn't coincidence, wasn't theatrics, wasn't some random pull of a card. It was a mirror they weren't prepared to look into. When that psychic sat at the table, shuffling her deck with the confidence of someone who believed she understood the mechanics of human transformation, she thought she knew what she was walking into. She thought she'd pull a few cards, decode your problems, hand your enemies a neat little explanation, and walk out feeling accomplished. But the truth is, she walked straight into the gravitational pull of a chosen one whose entire life has been a series of endings that never broke them, only rebuilt them stronger. And that's why the death card kept stalking the table like it had something urgent to say. It wasn't predicting you. It was reflecting you. It wasn't a prophecy. It was a portrait. This wasn't about an ending coming toward you. It was about all the endings you've already outlived, all the endings that shaped you, sharpened you, matured you, while everyone underestimated you. The psychic didn't panic because she saw danger. She panicked because she saw evolution, the kind most people don't survive long enough to understand. Here's the truth, chosen one. You are not someone who ends things recklessly. You end things precisely, deliberately, cleanly. The way someone who's learned their worth cuts ties with what no longer aligns with their growth. While others cling to old relationships, old versions of themselves, old comfort zones that suffocate their progress, you walk away from anything that tries to keep you small. You don't drag dead weight into new seasons. You don't keep old identities on life support. When something no longer matches your frequency, you let it go without apology. And that kind of strength shakes people who depend on stagnation to feel stable. Imagine a hallway behind you collapsing, not because you're fleeing from something, but because you've outgrown every room it ever offered. Your past isn't a place you live in. It's a place you learned from. That's why you move through endings like a force of nature. You don't crumble at the closing of a chapter, you molt. You shed the outdated skin, the outdated beliefs, the outdated versions of yourself that the world tried to trap you in. This is why the psychic couldn't dismiss what she was seeing. She realized the death card wasn't about destruction. It was about transformation so complete that the old you becomes untraceable. And that's what terrifies the people who wronged you. Your evolution removes their excuses. They can no longer say you're difficult when you've grown far beyond their emotional limitations. They can no longer claim you're too sensitive when your self-awareness now slices through every lie they ever told. They can no longer pretend you're the same person they manipulated, underestimated, or betrayed. Because you're not. That version of you is gone. And not in a tragic way, gone in a way that makes their past actions toward you look childish, desperate, and irrelevant. Every time they thought they buried you, you were simply regenerating. Every ending they celebrated was the start of your rebirth. Every setback they rooted for became the foundation of your rise. You turned your pain into wisdom. You turned your losses into leverage. You turned your silence into strategy. That's what made the psychic freeze. She saw a pattern she couldn't categorize. She saw someone who didn't just survive life's collapses, but mastered the art of outgrowing them. The death card wasn't warning you, it was announcing you, announcing your resilience, announcing your evolution, announcing that you are the end of every cycle that tried to confine you, and the beginning of a trajectory no one in that room could ever hope to keep up with. So, Chosen One, let this sink deep. You are not defined by what ended. You are defined by what you did after. And that's why they're intimidated, not because endings follow you, but because you turn every ending into a new form of power. They wanted the psychic to expose your downfall. Instead, she saw your rebirth again and again and again. They feared the card, but they should have feared the person it was reflecting. And as we rise out of this chapter, Chosen One, let this final truth settle into your bones. They didn't fail to expose you. They failed to realize you've already outgrown every version of yourself they tried to define. If this resonated with the power you know you carry, show your support and stay connected. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop 77 in the comments so the world knows you're stepping fully into your evolution. Share this message with someone who needs to be reminded they're not breaking, they're becoming.